Michael Fox. I'm from The Beach, a video production agency in New York, and also the founder of Pizza Club, online pizza community of pizza professionals and home pizza makers online. And I'm excited to chat today with Mary Ann and Paulie. I know some of you know a little bit about their background, but just to talk a little bit about what started off in the backyard, turned into now a thriving business with multiple locations all over the country, including here in Chicago. There's 3 locations in Chicago. You've got a Philly spot that opened up in the last few years, 2 in Brooklyn, and coming soon to Gowanus, right?
Gowanus, yep. Very summer. I don't know if that's
Columbus.
June 21st or September 21st.
Okay.
They said summer.
TBD. Columbus, and Columbus, Ohio, yeah, of course. And then in 2024, I don't know if you know this, but you guys were recognized for the top 50 top pizzas. I think it was number 16 in the world of artisanal pizza shops, right?
18.
18.
But in 2023. I don't know if I need it.
You gotta put it on.
Hold it down here. Hold it down.
Gotta hold it down?
Yes.
I gotta hold it down.
There
we go. 2023, we were number 17, so we got knocked down on that strike. But we were awarded the Hellboy, which hopefully everyone had.
Right.
Pizza of the Year by Italians.
Which is a big deal. This is a very well-respected list, and you've been featured on the Today Show and Vice and Eater, and and I know you've done a lot of work to support entrepreneurs like Mike from Mike's Hot Honey and Miriam from the Zara Report, who just opened up Yums of PDX out in Portland. So that's exciting. So anyway, thank you all for being here. Were we gonna have time for questions at the end? Maybe we'll see, but otherwise
Why not?
we'll just talk. But we're just gonna have a kind of casual conversation here. We're a small infant group, so I want to talk first about your kind of the beginnings of how you guys got to started this. So as I mentioned, you were in the backyard and you had built an oven, and this is mentioned a little bit in the book, by the way, Pizza from the Heart. 100 recipes for pies, pasta, salads, and more, which the book signing after. Talk a little bit about how you got started in the backyard and how that sort of led into what was this? Because not everybody might know the story.
It's still on, right? Okay, very good. Well, what happened was, early on I chose a career that I really wasn't suited for, but it took me years to find out that I wasn't suited for it. As you know, I kept on climbing the corporate ladder. I hit I was in corporate IT, and I really wasn't a geek. I thought maybe I was a geek, but it turned out I wasn't a geek. And there were a lot of other people who were geeks that were doing great and having great careers. Well, I hit the not a geek glass ceiling. You all know about glass ceilings. Well, I hit the not a geek glass ceiling, and I wasn't getting where I wanted to. I wasn't having the things. My family got the things that I wanted them to have because I just used credit cards to make that happen. And then, credit cards are high interest rate. You can't have that. So we just rolled that money into our mortgages until, you heard of a balloon mortgage? Well, ours was a different balloon mortgage, okay? Our mortgage balloon, right? But I always knew I wanted to do something else. At that point, one of the things I look back upon, I didn't realize what I was doing. I guess you kind of shut it out of your mind, was I was disappointing people. And I want to feel good about myself and what I do. I tried to do things my way, and my way didn't work in the geek world, And one of the things I lived for the weekend because I like to invite people over, cook for them. Go out to restaurants as well, love to eat, but I love to cook, and if we had a big event, First Holy Communion, confirmation, whatever, baptism, usually I'd cook for like 50 people. So people saw how much I loved it, and they always encouraged me. I said, you should open up a restaurant. They knew I was unhappy, right? But I didn't want to do that. I just did not look like something I wanted to do. And I kept on telling people they didn't know what they were talking about. But eventually, I knew I had to do something because I quote-unquote retired from AT&T and affiliated companies, and I became an independent consultant. It was, I saw what people did. They'd be working there as an employee of AT&T, and then all of a sudden their desk was empty, right? And I said, hey, cool, I guess they got fired, right? But lo and behold, 2 weeks later, they're sitting at their desk again, and they didn't have an AT&T badge on, they had a consultant's badge. So I said, oh, I can do that. I can retire, get a pension, like right now, what was I, 49? I think I was like 40, something like that. And it was 2001, so yeah, 48, almost 49. Almost 48. See, I'm not a geek, I can't even do simple math, right? And I decided to do this, and lo and behold, I couldn't find work nearby. So I wound up looking out of town to find work, and I wound up finding places. I'd fly there on a Sunday night or Monday morning, preferably. Come home on Friday afternoon or Friday night, not preferably. And I'd come home and see my family on the weekends. And right out of the box, my very first assignment was the beginning of September 2001, and I flew down there after right before my birthday, and on a Sunday night, September 9th, your birthday. Yeah. And I was driving to work on Tuesday, and I heard a report that a plane crashed into the World Trade Center. Obviously, everybody thought that it was just an accident or whatever. But then the next one hit, and suddenly I found myself 2,000 miles, or however many miles from my family, not able to get home. I actually could have gotten home because I could have just taken a rent-a-car. The rent-a-car company says, take the cars where you gotta go, but I couldn't afford to do that because I needed the money. I needed to pay the bills. So I was stuck away from my family, and that was a terrible time. And I had to get on an airplane to see them finally. The first weekend I didn't. But in any case, that went on and on for a few years, and there were times when I couldn't find work at home. Sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't. And I just had to do something else. And a friend came to me, a neighbor. He had a construction company, and he was looking to retire. And when I say construction company, I guess he built houses for people. He signed contracts to snow plow, big corporate office building, parking lots and stuff. But in any case, he was looking to, create income for himself. And he had found this place in Edison, New Jersey called Le Peep. It was a breakfast and lunch place. And he loved it. They were mostly in Colorado. It was a franchise. And he got this idea. He said to me, and this is how I got the whole idea. He says, listen, I'll build you a restaurant. You can run this thing. You just pay me. Everything's all yours. It's your business. You just pay me 5% of the gross. I go, oh, I like that idea. And we're trying to figure out how to do it. I was trying to figure out how I could learn. You have to go to Colorado to learn. Yada, yada, yada. In any case, we started looking for a place to do this. We drove all around New Jersey. Never found a place, thank God. And eventually, I was a pizza enthusiast at that point. This was in the mid-90s. Up until then, really, pizza to me was a New York slice, and that was it. I didn't know about other styles. And but in the 90s, I discovered Totono's in Coney Island, which was a coal oven place. And I started going around to different places, looking for other places that made pizza like that. And as a pizza enthusiast, I began to observe that, unlike a restaurant, which would make my head explode if I had to try to run it, it was simpler. And it emboldened me to think to myself, you know what, maybe this is something I can do. And I didn't tell my friend right away, but I went out and I found free oven plans to build a wood-fired oven, because I had to, before this, we were multi-level marketeers. For those of you who don't know what that is, we were Amway distributors. And part of that whole experience, we did it for a few years, was the people that introduced the business to you, you do well, they get a little bit of what you're doing. And to encourage you, unlike a boss, they put on these conferences where they bring people in who are successful to show you that you can do something, and that's when I realized, that you need to have belief if you're going to try to accomplish something. They would bring people out who are successful as Amway distributors and had mansions now. And they'd bring in people from the entertainment world who became successful. I remember the greatest example was someone named Muggsy Bogues. If you don't know who he is, he was a 5'3" NBA player. And they brought him in to speak with everybody, thousands of people in an arena. And we learned a lot of things from that. We learned that you have to speak things into existence. I started, I built this oven, but the belief is why I built the oven. It was not a hobby. It was never going to be a hobby. I wanted to prove to myself that I could open up a pizzeria and make wood-fired pizza, right? So I started doing that, and I told my friend, and he was very disappointed. I didn't realize it at first, but because he believed in Pete, but he didn't believe in me making pizza. But he did help me build the oven, and I built this oven, and I proved to myself I could do it. Very early on, I started telling people I was going to open up a pizzeria, and I started inviting people over. Eventually, I thought my pizza was good enough for, because as a pizza enthusiast, I participated online. There was a website called Slice that there were a lot of other pizza enthusiasts that contributed to and commented on. And my goal was to get the guy who founded Slice, his name is Adam Kuban. My goal was to get him to come to my house and try my pizza and have him say good things about it. Eventually I made that happen, long story short, because I only have so much time. So that's how I built the oven, and eventually Adam came. He came with Scott from Scott's Pizza Tours. And there were a couple of other pizza bloggers there. There was a woman from the Courier News, which is a Jersey paper. And he wrote it up, and that really helped me. And I started looking for a place to open up. I was going to open up in New Jersey because I thought I had to keep my job and do this so that I could pay the rent and mortgage. But eventually, it was explained to me that I could do this in a way where I could take a salary and pay the bills and still do this. And that got me to want to come back to it, because I wanted to come to Brooklyn. If we would have opened up in New Jersey, the whole time I'd be thinking about how to get back to Brooklyn, and it would have gotten harder and harder.
So why did you pick Greenpoint? How did you end up here? How did that come together?
I was in love with Williamsburg, infatuated, and I wanted to open up in Williamsburg. I even found a spot in Williamsburg on North 8th Street, right near Berry. And there are many things in my life that didn't come to fruition, and I thank God every day for those things. This spot was twice as much as I could have afforded. They didn't want to come down. I said, this place is going to be empty for a year or two if you're trying to rent this thing. Why don't you just reduce my rent and you'll have me in there right away? Oh no, we don't do that. So since then, the place has been like 4 restaurants, okay? But along the way also, I had spoken with other people who were doing what I wanted to do to find out what I needed to do to open up a pizzeria. And there were people who were very helpful. And 2 of them were in Williamsburg. One of them was very close, a few blocks away, Fornino. I spoke with Michael, who owns Fornino, and he was encouraging and gave me advice. Another guy on the other side of Williamsburg, much further away, Matthew from Motorino, I asked him a lot of things, and then I asked him, you think if I opened up all the way over here in Williamsburg, that would be too close, would it? He said, well, he has this Belgian accent. He's an Italian, corporate Belgian. I can't, old Paulie, I don't know, that's too close. So and he suggested I go to Park Slope. And another, I'm really glad I didn't go to Park Slope, and I can explain to you why. Park Slope was great, but at the time, Williamsburg was the place to be, right? And I knew that, if I opened up in Park Slope, the people in Park Slope would come to my pizzeria, okay? But the people in Williamsburg, they're not going to Park Slope to eat, because they're in the coolest place in the world, right? At least they thought they were. But I knew that if we opened up in a neighborhood like Williamsburg, the people from Park Slope were going to come eventually, right? They're going to hear about it. So, but so to me, I didn't find anything in Park Slope. Thank God I didn't, right? And I said, okay, I have to do something. I can't open up in Williamsburg. Let me do what Roberta's did. I was in love with Roberta's. If you haven't been to Roberta's, you need to go to Roberta's, right? I was in love with what they did. It was amazing. Because it told me that I didn't have to have millions of dollars to open up a restaurant, right? They took this old auto repair place or something, they hardly did anything to it at all, and they turned it into a place where everybody wanted to be. It was very enlightening to me, and I wanted to emulate that. I loved how the people there, they didn't have uniforms on. You know, you couldn't tell, you know, unless they had a checkbook in their hand or whatever, you couldn't tell the guests from the staff. It was kind of like a club. It was like I called it the Little Rascals opened up a pizzeria. So I saw what they did, and they went to Bushwick. My wife was tapping my leg. I'm talking too much? He asked me a question, I'm answering it.
Well, you will answer for 6 hours.
All right, well, you know, we got time. Because at the point, then we'll shorten it up. It's her book, I gotta let her talk, right? Because this is answering the question, how we went up in Greenpoint. Then I'm gonna shut up, right? I said, well, let me do what Roberta's did. I can't go to Bushwick. They went to the next neighborhood, and they defined that neighborhood. And I said, let me see what's on the other side. And there was Greenpoint. I said, let me go to Greenpoint. And I drove up Manhattan Avenue, and I was very disappointed. I saw dollar stores and Polish restaurants, okay? I was looking for Bedford and North 7th. For those of you who know about Bedford and North 7th, it was the epicenter of, you know, hip, all right? I didn't find it, but eventually I came back, and I found this neighborhood. It was Good Friday, 2009. My son was coming back from Colorado to work my oven in my backyard because that was the weekend when Adam Cooper was coming, and I had to make sure that I had somebody who worked the fire very well. The way I worked at home, the oven was outside. I was setting up the pizza inside, and somebody had to work the oven. A lot of times I'd ask people to help, and they'd go back and watch TV. I'd walk outside, and there's a cold oven. So my son took great pride in the oven, so I brought him home. He was in school, he was at the Air Force Academy. I brought him home it was his birthday. Easter Sunday was his birthday. Picked him up, I had time to kill, and I came over here because I saw that there was maybe some spaces here. I had never seen this intersection before. I never heard of Franklin Street. And I came here, it was Good Friday, I parked the car, I was waiting for like 5 o'clock for this reel or something, and lo and behold, Jesus was walking up Franklin Street, and he was being whipped, okay? And it was like, wow. But I looked around and I saw, 16 years ago, I saw exactly what you see out there today. Before there was nothing there. There were a few bars, no restaurants. But I saw, and I found this place. At first, I was looking at other places on other streets. But when I found this place, I walked inside. I saw that space back there. This place was, I can show you pictures afterwards. Nothing like this. But I saw that that's where my oven was going to go. And here I
I love it. Thank you for that.
Sorry.
No, that was great. Mary Ann, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the book and how this came to be, because I know that this has been in the works for a long time. So tell me where the idea, when you first came with this idea, and sort of the beginning process of starting to put this book together.
The idea probably came at least 12 years ago. I don't know why it's echoing.
Maybe just point it over there.
Like that.
No, the other one.
The other one? In any event, I don't even think I really need it. It's a small group here. But in any event, from the very beginning when we opened, people were always asking questions continually, because we always talk to our guests all the time. And people would just be asking, how'd you do it? Why'd you do it? Like, they were so enamored with the story, because let's face facts, we weren't 30 when we started this. He was 56 and I'm a little bit younger, and so it was kind of risky for us to do this, but I don't know, I was never really that scared. Like, people ask me that all the time. We really put everything on the line to do it, but we were kind of those people anyway, like we always threw caution to the wind, But in any event, I just felt like he started talking about doing something. He was already in his early 50s, and I'm like, wow, if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? Like, what do we really have to lose? Like, our youngest son was I guess 18 at the time, so he had just been finishing high school. It wasn't like our kids like needed us to be around at night or whatever. Our parents were already gone. They've been gone a very long time. The last one to pass away was my mom, like 27 years ago. So, like, we didn't have those things that were holding us down like other people I knew at our age were experiencing. So we were fortunate in that way. You know, I was still working a full-time position, and obviously he was working still consulting, but he was never happy about it. And the bottom line is, you know, he's such a creative person, and I knew he was creative because he's a wonderful cook and he's done all his own recipes, but I didn't realize how much until like we started planning the restaurant, because you know he designed the menus and he came up with everything, like the look, he picked everything out, you know, and it's just been wonderful to be a part of our story. I mean, I feel like, for me anyway, this has just been like another chapter. Like, we did everything else before, like we'll be married 46 years in June, so you know, I feel like we experienced so many life events. Like, we had kids, we buried parents, we took care of his sister, she lived with us. Like, we did so many of those things, which I feel like, and I tell people, those are really the hard things. Yes, business is hard, you know, but I've also always looked at it like sometimes we're gonna make money, sometimes we're not. Like, we've gone into a couple of ventures that we had to close, but at the end of the day, we're still here and it's all good. I mean, luckily, I was brought up with a very good perspective and strong perspective on life, and I feel like that's what's pulled us through. We're very tough people. Listen, we also grew up in New York City, so I think you also have that very tough mentality. Like, just growing up here, you just, you know, competing with so many people. It's very different than growing up in a small town. Like, my kids grew up in New Jersey. Like, the whole vibe is totally different, you know, when you're in the suburbs. But when he started talking about it, I felt like, I said to him, well, if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? And I mean, I had no idea what it was going to become. I don't think either one of us had any idea. But when we opened, from the minute we opened, it was just, we got a lot of people, you know, and the first 6 months we didn't have a liquor license, so that was challenging. But we made it work, and luckily we found some friends and family who wanted to invest, because we really had no money to put in. We actually took a home equity loan to borrow money, you know. And like, I think about that now when I had to recount stuff for the book, it's like, wow, you know, did we do that? Like, I keep thinking back on things that we did, and I'm like, did we do that? But like, we just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And I said to him, like, as long as we're together, it didn't matter to me. I don't need anything. I'm not a material person. I really am not. And like, as long as we're together and we can have a way to make it work, and for you to live, you know, leave the corporate world and make a living at this, you know, and I figured eventually I would end up quitting my job. But quite frankly, the first year that we opened in 2010, I was still working a full-time job, a part-time job, and I was helping on the back end of the business. When I say it now, it's like, wow. You know, but like, when you have a business and you don't understand it unless you do, there's a certain mentality you have to have, because if something needs to be done, like, you have to do it. I remember the first night that we opened here, you know, I was here earlier, like, helping clean the bathrooms. I mean, you know, I've done a lot of things. When I was here, if it was busy, I would buzz tables. I don't care. I'm not going to ask people to do things for me. Like, that's just my mentality that I'm not willing to also do. And I want to know the operation as well. So I never physically had a job here, because I had volunteered, by the way. But he didn't want me in the front. He wanted, you know, the younger vibe of the neighborhood. And I wasn't insulted. I was great. I don't really want to be a host anyway. I don't want to stand up and see people. Listen, I've done that if I had to, but like, that was only an extreme measure if he didn't have anybody else, because he wanted, you know, to reflect what the neighborhood was about. And we were very fortunate. I was saying to somebody before that people just showed up. I mean, they just kept coming. But I still say, more than anything, I think people were just enamored with the story. I really do. I mean, it's the same thing with the book. I mean, and I'm happy the way it came out. I'm losing, I guess. I'm happy the way it came out. I was telling my agent there, who I adore, Sarah, from the David Black Agency, that that's why he really never wanted to do a book. I was writing it in my head for at least 12 years. I'm not kidding you. I was journaling in the beginning because we would have so many stories of odd things that would happen here, and you know, whatever. And one of my good friends said, "Man, you really should be writing this stuff down." And I did, and that kind of helped me start my first proposal. I went back to all those writings and I transcribed them, and that kind of gave me the impetus to move forward with it. But I'm happy with the way it turned out, because I didn't, and he didn't want it to just be a cookbook, because that's not really what we're about. I mean, it is, yes, we do the recipes. He's an amazing cook, you know, he's a great pizza maker, whatever, but I wanted to use it really for myself as more of an inspirational tool for people. Because over the years, people kept coming back and saying, "Oh, you're so inspiring, you're so inspiring." And he'd always say to them, "What did I inspire you to do?" You know, and that's when I kept hearing that and talking to people. I felt like I at least wanted, for whatever. I mean, I don't really care if we make $1 from it. Sarah knows that. As long as, you know, I got in advance and, you know, it's paying for everything. We had a phenomenal photographer. He was terrific. I've had so many comments about the photography. And I've looked at other books since I've been in stores, and I have to say, the photography is really amazing. I think it made the book. And, you know, that is really what he started out wanting to do in life, was be a photographer. He went to the School of Visual Arts for 2 years, and he dropped out because his parents couldn't help him. They were pretty blue collar, I
My
would
work
say.
wasn't morose enough for me.
Anyway, that's part of my story, but I'm just happy to have it out there. It just feels kind of surreal, I tell people. When you have something in your brain for so long, and it never seemed to be happening, it just, like, different people like Matt, and, you know, like, I had worked on a proposal early on, maybe 6 years ago in New Jersey with my wonderful friend Colleen, and we actually came up, I thought, with a pretty decent little proposal. What do I know? We sent it to 8 agents. I had written to a few people I knew that had books already, like Ovenly. Like, I knew all the people in the area, I still do. And we sent it out to like 8 agents. We never got one response, not one response. And so we kind of put it on the back burner, or I did, when we moved back here permanently. That's when I felt like, I knew at that point, we were back in New York. This is where we grew up. Like, I just felt like we had to do it in New York. I you know, once we came back here, then like the ideas started coming and everything. I remember meeting a friend of yours, Sarah, and that's how we ended up here, because somebody was sitting in the front. I was talking to them on a Saturday night, and she said, "Oh, you really should," you know, so many people have said over the years, "Oh, you should really write a book." I mean, how many people said this to me? And she said, "Oh, well, my friend works for the David Black Agency. I'll give you her phone number." And that's how I met her. Everything that happened to us, really, a lot of things happened from conversations. I'm reading a great book right now called Talk. It's really good. Look it up. And it talks just about that, you know, the networking and the conversations with people. And I'm telling you, that's how we built this whole business. Like, even our guy in Chicago, we didn't know him from Adam. He came to the door one Saturday, right, with his family. Derek Tongue. He was here for a wedding that weekend or something. He came with his family to eat, and that was it.
No, that wasn't.
That wasn't it? Oh, well, then you tell me.
Commenter on Slice, and he reached out to me. But I had determined, first I thought I was just going to be the guy making pizza there, because all my idols, Chris Bianco, Mark Iacano, Dom DeMarco, they were the ones making the pizza. And I thought I would just be happy to get my bills paid. I'll stand there, slave away making pizza. But as it turns out, that wasn't the case, and but I didn't want to expand and open up more restaurants, so I decided to help other people. I learned this through multi-level marketing again. Help other people and you'll help yourself. So I decided that I wanted to do that. And people would reach out to me for advice. I always, because Chris Bianco, when I met with him before we opened, I thanked him profusely. And he said, don't thank me, Paulie, just pay it forward. And I just have to do that for the rest of my life because he asked me to. Chris Bianco has as much to do with any success we have with anybody because he took the time to talk to me and I was not going to let him down, okay? So in any case, I get an email one day from Derek Tung saying that he's thinking about expanding his Green Market little pizza thing he had going on. And I was already looking. I had a list of different cities, the 20 hippest neighborhoods in the country. And Wicker Park was like second on the list, I think, right? And when he said, I said, what are you thinking of doing? I said, out in the suburbs, right, he's from Chicago. I said, gee, that's too bad. I'm hoping to do something with somebody in Chicago. And then that was it. That was it. It was boom, boom, boom. And there we go. So, are you happy now that you found somebody to answer a question?
Yeah,
briefly,
very
like
excited.
she did?
Yeah, she did a
All
great
right,
job.
unlike me.
That wasn't that.
What do you got? What do you got?
Yeah, so no, that's great. And Derek has now 3 restaurants in Chicago, right? And
a catering company.
Yeah, so 2 slice shops, and they have a Paulie Gee Neapolitan spot, which does Detroit pizzas as well. So that's something. Go ahead.
He's actually amazing. I mean, what he's done is nothing short of incredible. But he actually just opens in an Asian market. He and his wife are Asian, and it just opens in an Asian market where they're doing like a pop-up there. It's Paulie Gee's and
Granny's Logan Square at
Gangnam Market. We actually went to this market last year when we were out visiting him, and it was an amazing market. It really was. So he's doing some kind of a pop-up there now too. And I mean, he really has done incredible things.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's interesting. I love his story also because he basically was going to be a doctor, and he dropped out of medical school.
His parents thought he was going to be.
And then he went into healthcare administration, which he hated. And he started making pizza in this market. And now this is what he's doing. So it's just so interesting to see like the transformation of people's stories also. Because listen, it's not perfect, it's not easy running a small business, number one. Try to do it with food. Try to do it like in a major city, like New York City or Chicago. It's very challenging. But I tell people also, you have to have a passion for something or you're gonna run for the hills when something goes wrong. If you have a passion for it and you really love it, you're gonna stick it out. But if it's also yours, that is totally different than working for somebody else.
And you got to believe that you can do it.
And I always say, yes, things have been hard, believe me. We've had our ups and downs. I've cried. I remember the first year, we were still, living in New Jersey for quite a while. Sometimes I would cry all the way home. I mean, I'm not kidding. He never cried. I cried. I would say, I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know how we're going to. The first year was tough. I didn't know how we were going to make it through. We actually borrowed money on our credit line again just to do some payroll that first year. But we just kept putting one foot in front of the other. But I always look at it also like I had many jobs. And did I love every boss I had? No. Did I love everything I had to do? No. And did I love sitting down for evaluations and not getting a good one when I thought I should have gotten one? So like there were moments that I hated, even though I liked most of my jobs, that I didn't want to live through either. So I kind of look at it like, also, like there's nothing perfect in life. Like sometimes you have to make compromises, but I feel like on the whole, we really made a good decision. I felt like that the first year. I never felt like it was a bad decision. I never felt that way. I don't think he ever felt that way either.
It's a beautiful
I
book.
love the way you earmarked it.
I have a lot of notes.
You really think we're going to get to all of those?
No, definitely not. But I think one of the things, the photography is beautiful in the book, but you've broken this up into chapters based on, meats, vegetarians, vegan, but you also have a section in there. First, I want to talk about the namings of the pizza, because I know a lot of people who've ordered pizzas here are interested to know kind of the process in which you come up with these names, and I know you talk a lot about that in the book for specific things, but these ideas, how do they come to you, and what is it usually the pizza that you develop first, and kind of go from there? Talk about the naming process for the pizzas.
Always the pizza first. There may have been one more I came up with one because I like the name. I can tell you about that briefly in a minute. But first of all, again, I was inspired by Roberta's. Roberta's menu, they always had cute little names on there. So I wanted to do that. And I'd look for these clever names. If I couldn't come up with it myself, I'd put it out to the staff. And the staff, I had this one dishwasher, AJ, right? He was great coming up with names for pies. And if all else failed, I'd put it out on Instagram and ask people to come up with names, and I'd give them a free pizza if I chose their name, and that's basically how we did that. I had one. I loved the name so much, but the pie was just not good. And I got rid of the pie, even though I loved the name. It was a pie with spaghetti squash and lemon juice, something else, right? So, since it was spaghetti, if anybody knows who Sergio Leone was, he made spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood, right? So, and there was lemon on the pie, and I called it the Sergio Leone. It was an ingenious name. Pie sucked. Okay, so that was gone. But that was basically the process. How's that for a short answer?
That's great. I love
what else you got? What else you got?
So let's talk a little bit about some of your partners that you've kind of created a section in the back of the book for other people's inspirations and pizzas, like Derek we talked about from Chicago. So I want to know a little bit more about how you kind of sourced some of those ideas for the pizzas and the other recipes from your partners and friends.
Well, basically for our franchise company and, our other slice shop and what we have here, I went to everybody and just asked them to give me, a few recipes that they'd like me to put in the book, and they were very happy to do that. That was easy. I mean, I don't want to say it was easy. You know how it is when you put something out and people don't respond and you have to keep getting back to them. That was hard. The other thing that I thought was interesting for the book, and Sarah, maybe you can help me with this one. I forget who came up with the collaboration chapter with all the other shops here in Brooklyn. Was that me? I mean, I don't know. I don't remember anymore. But what I did is I wrote to about 20 different people. Oh, this is really bad. Right? I wrote to about 20 different people that I knew in the area that we either had been using their product or I liked their shop because I went in there and I wanted to sort of I really don't know how it came about. Maybe it came to me in a dream. I don't know. But I've always been very big about supporting small businesses, especially in this area or any area. And if it's somebody new that comes to the neighborhood, I usually go in and say, hello, can I help you with something? Because I know the pain of trying to open a small business. I know it very well. So if there's anything we could do to help, whether it's just whatever it is, just support sometimes for people to be able to vent about something or ask about rules or regulations or whatever. So I kind of sent an email to about 20 different people that I knew locally. And the response I got was incredible, of people that wanted to collaborate with me on a recipe. Now, I don't really view myself as the very creative type. I can do something, but not everything. And that was challenging for me because what they said from the get-go, the publisher, was it would have to be something that wasn't pizza related. Let's do something that's not pizza related. So basically, we had to come up with something that they do and marry it with something that we do, either an ingredient that we have here or a recipe or whatever. And there were a couple of people I would have liked to have gotten, like Homer down the street, but he was busy. Like a few people really wanted to contribute, but they just didn't have the time to do it with me and come up with a recipe. I think there's 10 or 11 in there now, but I was very happy to do that with people. Everybody was very responsive, and it took a little bit of creativity on my part to figure out what we were going to do, but I wanted it to be sort of a cross-representation of different styles and of course to include the vegan community, because we were always big advocates for vegans in this neighborhood from the very beginning, and I'm talking 15 years ago, when there were not a lot of good products out there. There was not good cheese. That's why we made our own vegan sausage, and then we made our own, ricotta cheese, because there wasn't a lot of good offerings. So probably out of that group of people, there's 3 or 4 that are vegan, and so I wanted that included. And I'm very happy with the way that chapter also turned out. I was very humbled a lot of times when people responded to me, and especially Laura from Van Leeuwen, because we know her from when they first started. They were in the neighborhood. They had not opened their shop here yet. Their first shop was on Manhattan Avenue, and the guys that built out our space here ended up building out her space. I think they have 72 locations now, if I'm not mistaken.
I have to tell you a little bit about that. When we first opened the slice shop, I didn't want that whole space. I wasn't thinking big enough, and I told the landlord, well, can I just rent out the front? You can rent out the back to somebody else. And he says, well, if you're just going to rent out one, I have to rent you the back. I'll rent to somebody else in the front. I didn't want that. I wanted the corner spot. So I said, okay, I'll rent the whole thing and I'll sublet it to somebody. And I thought ice cream would be a good idea, right? Okay. I went to 4 different big ice cream places. Nobody was interested whatsoever, including Van Leeuwen. Okay? They said, oh, that's too close to our shop. We have on the other side of Greenpoint. And now, if you go walk around the corner, okay, there's a beautiful new Van Leeuwen back there. Okay? So thank God that they, at that time, didn't think it was a good idea. That's one of those other things. Thank God they didn't say yes, because our slice shop wouldn't be what it is today without that back area.
Speaking of partnerships, you have in the book, there's a recipe with Billy Durney from Hometown Barbecue. I'm curious how that collaboration came together. I know you went and had tried you went there for the chairs. There's a story in the book about interested in the furniture that they had in the restaurant, which led to you getting turned on to Hometown Barbecue and their brisket. Can you talk a little bit about that collaboration? And
chairs were very expensive. One of the very first things I did was look for mismatched chairs. Why? Why do you think? Because Roberta's had mismatched chairs. So I needed more chairs, and somebody showed me a picture, and I like these folding chairs, these old wooden folding chairs. They could be convenient, they're easy to put away. Matter of fact, there's one right back there if you look, leaning against that wood cabinet back there. And somebody showed a picture of this new place that was opening up in Red Hook, Hometown Barbecue, and I went there and found out if he could sell me the chairs. I guess he sold me some chairs, I forget. I wound up buying a whole bunch somewhere else. And when I was there, I was talking with him, really nice guy, and I said maybe we could do something together here. Again, I was always looking to find people in the community, like Chris Bianco encouraged me to collaborate, and that's how we came up with the Hometown Barbecue pie.
I want to talk a little bit about the charitable side of things. I know that.
Give me that.
Yeah, this is for you, Mary Ann. I know you're very involved in a lot of organizations, including Slice Out Hunger, Women in Pizza, and others.
Yeah.
So talk about how that's important to the business and to you.
Well, that's always been, my soft point. I grew up in a very charitable household. That was an example I learned from my grandmother. And I just felt like, whatever you have, we always paid it forward, even though we didn't have a lot, I always saw her at work with that. And so really my dream has come true with the restaurant, not necessarily with the pizza, but I kind of knew in the back of my mind that even if we did okay, I didn't know how we were going to do, but even if we did okay, then I would be able eventually to just do that. And that's really what I want to do down the road. But I've had an opportunity to do many things and support many charities that are near and dear to my heart, and that makes me very happy. I mean, because for me, that's what it's all about. I don't, like I said, I don't care about much except my family, my friends, and whatever. But that's my heartbeat, and I feel like I've accomplished a lot of that, you know, in this business, because I don't think there's anybody that's ever come to us and I've ever turned down. I review every request. Even the first year when we were in business, you know, people were coming to us for stuff, and, you know, I would be, you know, willing to give a gift certificate or do this, and he'd say, "Man, you know, we don't have any money, you know, we're not even paying payroll," and I'd say to him, "Don't worry, let me take care of it." And even when we didn't have a lot, I was doing it. So, you know, I really felt like because we put so much of that out there, I just believe that's why we've been given so much. You know, you can call it whatever you want, but I know it because I've seen it. Because a lot of stuff that's happened with us is nothing short of ridiculous, really. And, you know, I feel like, you know, you're putting out the good vibes, you're putting out the good energy to people. You know, I don't care if you give me anything in return, you know, but as long as you're putting out something good, and not that there's not horrible things in the world. I know the world we live in, it's madness, it's crazy, but I've always refused to be a part of that world. You know, like if I'm not gonna put out something positive, I'm not interested in participating. That's just how I feel. There's enough negativity and enough nonsense. I don't have to add my voice to that. That's just how I feel about it. I would rather take my energy and turn it around to help somebody or to help somebody succeed in business or whatever it is. Anytime, even with Slice Out Hunger, Scott's Pizza Tour, who we knew from 2008, he came to our house for one of our first pizza tastings. We've known him forever. And he started this organization, Slice Out Hunger, which is amazing. And I volunteer my time with that. You know, we've done pizza on the pier with him. And it's just, it's wonderful to pay it back. You know, when you're fortunate and you've been blessed, that's your responsibility. It's not to sit in an ivory tower and, you know, you don't operate in a bubble. You know, so I just feel like that's so important. And, you know, I think we've accomplished a lot of that, and that makes me really happy.
That's great. And by the way, Slice Out Hunger Pizza on the Pier coming up in a few weeks,
I know.
so check that out. It's a great event and help feed the food insecure.
We're gonna be in Chicago.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody else. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of the recipes that you sort of are near and dear to your hearts in the book. I know you don't have favorites, right? They're all your babies. But is there a recipe that you guys really gravitate to, that you're pulled towards?
I like what we did with the book. You know, I'm not a chef, okay? I just love to eat, and I'd always cook for myself, and I'd cook things the way I wanted them to taste. I'm never one to follow blueprints or recipes. That's why she says I'm creative. It's because I want to do things in a way that I'm most comfortable. There's plenty of ways you're supposed to run a restaurant that I don't follow because I'm just not comfortable with that. But at home, I would just cook all the time, and I like the fact that, you know, these recipes in there are just things that I would do at home. You know, it sort of tells our story, how we develop things, and you know, so there's just so many in there. Like you said, it's hard to pick a favorite. There's one with rigatoni and broccoli and something, white wine that I love. And most of them, I would start out with somebody's recipe, but then I would give it my own spin. The French onion soup, actually, let's say my French onion soup is my favorite because we have a French restaurant around the corner next to our slice shop, La Gamine, and they have really good French onion soup, and it's vegetarian. I'll never say that my pizza's better than anybody else's. You won't ever catch me saying it, right? It's not for me to say. But my French onion soup is better than that. I love the guy, but my French onion soup is better. And part of it was because a chef, he was a chef in our kitchen, Andrew Brown, he came up with a vegetarian version. You know, you taste that soup, it's hard to believe it's vegetarian because it tastes like it was made with beef stock, and it wasn't. He came up with that because he was vegetarian. And that soup, you know, that soup always has to be on the menu here, at least in the winter.
Mary Ann, do you have any favorites or recipes that speak to you?
It's so hard because anything he would make is really phenomenal. He's very fussy about ingredients, and that was, you know, the same thing here when we opened. Like, you know, we really didn't have a lot of money, but he would never compromise on the ingredients. They always had to be the best, even if it was more money. He never cared about that. You know, we didn't take any shortcuts, and everything in the book that are the home recipes, which was another great idea. I'm not sure who thought about that one, but I love also. You know, I'm not the cook or chef in the family. I just went along. I was sort of like the sous chef, and but who could complain? All my friends would call me for, you know, his recipes. You know, and I was like, okay, great. You know, I'd ask him, did you give up a recipe? And that was one thing that was a little helpful to start the whole process, because my good friend Joanne, who's long gone, she loved his recipes. And one day she came over to my house, and I guess he had sent her some, and she made me a book with all the laminated recipes. And actually I went back to that, you know, when I was starting the book to look at that, you know, and I felt like my friend Joanne was like a part of the process also, because we had a lot of stuff written down. So that was the hardest part, was getting everything together, and obviously a recipe is very technical, and so that's been my biggest fear, that somebody's gonna call up and say something's not right, because we're really, you know, not chefs, you know, like he would make things just like, you know, throwing things in, so it was hard because we had to like quantify stuff.
Right. By the way, how many people here make dough at home? I'm just curious, or starting to. Okay, so what are some of the things? Because you talk about the different styles of pizza, Neapolitan, New York, Grandma, and how to make the base dough, which helps you make a lot of the recipes in the book. So just really quick about the dough recipes. Is there a tip that you would give just for a new pizza maker, or somebody who's, you know, starting to make it in their home pizza oven, not necessarily in like an outdoor oven, in their home pizza oven? Like, what are some tips that you'd be like, just you should look out for it? I know you have something you can give for the pizza maker at home, just to like
Get an outdoor oven.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, with your outdoor oven, what is a tip that you would give to a pizza maker?
These Giannones look really good.
Yeah.
They came out a little bigger now.
You can get an indoor uni oven too that does
Yeah.
900 degrees
And
not sponsored.
yeah, when you're making that style of pizza, the Neapolitan pizza, you have to get it hot. Otherwise, if you can't get the oven hot enough, make a different style. So, but the other oven that I saw recently, it's so funny how you know, Uni came out with this oven and they're doing really well with it. There was another company, Gosney, that made a different style oven completely. When we went to the Pizza Expo, all of a sudden they were imitating Uni, you know, which was, you know, I was very surprised at that. So I know somebody with the Gosneys. She used to work for us here. She has a place in LA called Naughty Pie Nature. Went there with my buddy right over there, Lance. They were actually running the place on these Gosneys. So, you know, if you can have an oven outside, you should do that for that style of pizza. But temperature's important. So.
We have one question.
Uh-oh.
Lance.
So I've heard the Paulie Gee story for many years, and I have propagated it. But as I've gotten to know you two better, it's like I see what a partnership is now. I'm wondering, like, you were talking about you're working another job when this started, but how has that partnership changed over the course of all this? I see more a real. I've seen you are an equal partnership, and so how did that change?
Well,
She quit her job.
listen, it's not always easy working with your spouse, that I can tell you. But it's good that, you know, we had a very strong foundation coming into this. That's all I would say. Because we've known people in this industry that when they started, they were married, and we know a number of them that got divorced. Because it's intense, you know, it's very intense, and there's always something going on. But I think that we always had a good partnership, but then we just also had to start learning how to do a business together. You know?
There are things that I don't like to do, and she's always willing to do them. Whenever I cook at home, when I'm done eating, I hit the couch, and she cleans. So, administration, she's been great with administration, and we have payroll, all these, you know.
I had to pick up a lot more with the business during the pandemic because we closed here and let everybody go. So at that point, you know, I had already just quit my job like about a year or so before. And, you know, at least I was available then, but I really kind of went more full-time in the business, starting with the pandemic, because I sort of had to jump in and do a lot of things because we didn't have anybody doing them, you know. So, but that's going back to what I was saying. When you have a business, you know, all the roles aren't always defined. You have to fill in whatever the gaps are. I mean, I remember when I was still working, at lunchtime, I would sometimes go out to Restaurant Depot, and then I would bring stuff back to my staff lounge, you know, in the kitchen, and put all the stuff in there. And then I would leave at 4:30 and drive it from New Jersey to here because we needed some things. Like he would call me and say, you know, and I look back at it now and it's like, wow, you know, I did all that, you know? But I don't know, you do what you have to do. It's sort of like anything else in life. You're so enmeshed in it and you've committed to it, and something needs to be done, so you do it, you know. The only good thing about my having that full-time job was, if he asked me for something, I could say, I'm sorry, I can't do that tomorrow, I'm working. You know, I'm at my job, you know, I can't do that. But like, once I quit my full-time job, then I was somewhat more available. I did help our son a lot, I was saying before, in 2022, when we opened our shop in Philadelphia, and he's thinking of maybe opening another location. And I've already told him, tread lightly, because I don't think I'm gonna be able to help you like I did the last time. Because I spent the whole summer helping him that year. And going back to Restaurant Depot, I remember going there in 2022 in the summer. It was hot as hell. And here I am at Restaurant Depot by myself, loading soda into the car. And I thought to myself, oh my God, here I am, 10 years later, or whatever it is, and I'm doing the same thing I was doing 10 years ago.
He'll have a wife now, so you won't have to worry about it. But the reason, to answer your question, is that she loves this business as much as I do. I know people who didn't want somebody to go into that business, and they failed, and I think part of it is because of that. You know, I've seen it in different, you know, not just in a restaurant. She really, and she loves it. She loves people as much as I do. She comes in here and we talk to people. We make, you know, we have friends. We love them, and they live in more than one. They live in active adult communities, and that's great. They play a lot of pickleball, okay, but we make new friends all the time, and they can be anywhere from, you know, in their early 20s until their 80s, and we, you know, we love people, and we get to do this, you know. So she supports it. She does what has to be done because she likes it, and she wants to see it succeed as much as I do. The other people, they're just waiting for it to fail so that they can get back to selling whatever.
All right, any question for, one? No, go ahead. All right.
Good. And Paulie, so as you started getting more creative and deviating away from the prototypical New York slice, for instance, you got the Brisket-Five-O in here. Now you're buying more product. You're buying different product. How concerned were you for your ROI, your return on investment? So what if that product didn't sell? What if it bombed?
Well, it was, first of all, it was the opposite. I started here, and all of those creative things started here, right? And if we tried it, you know, and it bombed, you just take it off the menu. And well, one of the things that I did, by the way, here, I'd always look to contrast sweet and savory. That was something, I use that as a guide. But, you know, if it's not working, you just take it off the menu. When I opened up the slice shop, it kind of went backwards. The stuff we serve there is the stuff that typically you would have found 50 years ago. That's the whole idea of the shop. It's more of a whole experience. But, you know, and you also, you have to, my son is very good at it. He busts my chops all the time about, you got to check prices on things. These guys, they change their prices. You know, you don't even know it. But you have to stay on top of that and make sure that, hey, I don't want to get into politics, but I'm very happy right now that my tomatoes come from California, my cheese comes from Wisconsin, and my pepperoni comes from Ohio, okay? And you have to manage your costs. You know, but if I love something, I'll put it on the menu and, you know, and maybe, you know, let something else give me more in return. The Brisket-Five-O, I love that pie. They don't serve it here. We have pickled pineapple on there. I always say no pineapple on pizza, but if it's pickled, it's okay.
All right, great. Well, I want to put your hands together, give a round of applause for Paulie and Mary Ann. Thank you guys for your time.
Let's go.
All right, let's go. We'll part two later. Thanks, everyone. We're going to do book signing.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.